United States has negotiated down the prices of 10 top-selling prescription drugs used by Medicare by as much as 79%. The price cuts are part of a plan hailed by President Joe Biden that hopes to ease anger about high prices ahead of November elections. It aims to save $6 billion in its first year, with new prices set to come into effect in 2026. Biden declared victory over Big Pharma at an event in Maryland, alongside Vice President Kamala Harris.
We're going to keep standing up for Big Pharma. I fought too damn hard to yield now.
For years, Big Pharma has often inflated the price of life-saving medications, often charging many times what it would cost to make just to increase their profits. And millions of Americans have suffered as a result.
It was the pair's first joint appearance since Biden ended his re-election campaign and Harris replaced him on the Democratic ticket. Though it was an official event, Biden turned his speech into a de facto campaign rally. He criticized Republicans for not supporting Medicare's right to negotiate drug pricing.
The guy we're running against, what's his name? Donald Dump or Donald whatever. They want to get rid of this, what we passed. They're fighting to get rid of what we've just passed. No, I'm serious. No help from Republicans passing the Inflation Reduction Act thanks to the tie-breaking vote of Kamala made it possible.
Biden's signature Inflation Reduction Act received no Republican support, but was signed into law in 2022 after Harris's tie-breaking Senate vote. It was the first law to allow Medicare to negotiate prices for some of the most costly drugs that the program covers for 66 million people. Merck & Co.'s diabetes drug Januvia faces the steepest percentage cut in its price out of the drugs on the list, decreasing 79%. The government says Novo Nordisk's insulin Aspart products will face the second steepest at 76%. Republican House leadership in a statement described Medicare's power to negotiate drug prices as price fixing. Drug makers have voiced their opposition to the new discounts, saying they would not necessarily lower out-of-pocket costs for patients and could hinder further innovation. The next round of Medicare drug price talks are expected to include another 15 drugs and begin in February.
Gaza's health ministry on Thursday said the death toll from 10 months of Israel's military offensive had crossed 40,000. In a statement, the Palestinian health ministry said another 40 people had been killed in the past 24 hours in the war-ravaged enclave. The grim milestone comes as a new round of ceasefire talks was underway in Qatar's capital, Doha, aimed at ending the bloody conflict and securing the release of more than 100 Israeli hostages held captive by Hamas militants in Gaza. The fighting began when Palestinian fighters rampaged through Israeli communities on October 7th, killing more than 1,200 and taking around 250 captives back to Gaza, according to Israeli tallies. In response, Israel pledged to eradicate the Hamas Islamist group that rules Gaza, and its onslaught has reduced much of the densely populated territory to rubble and rendered most of its 2.3 million residents homeless.
This week, we expect these talks to move forward as planned.
A ceasefire outlined in the spring by U.S. President Joe Biden would pause fighting and begin the return of the hostages, but both sides have blamed the other for failing to reach an agreement. Palestinian Mohammed al-Najjar said she wished those meeting in Qatar would look upon her with mercy. She said she wished for a ceasefire today, before tomorrow. In Tel Aviv, relatives of those held hostage demanded the government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reach a deal returning the captives. Yotam Cohen's brother Nimrod is among the hostages. His message to the negotiating team in Qatar was that if they could not bring home the captives, that they should not return to Israel. He said they have no reason to come home empty-handed. The high-level negotiations on Thursday include Israeli, Egyptian, and American spy chiefs and Qatar's prime minister, and the discussions are underway under the shadow of even wider regional tensions. U.S. warships, submarines, and warplanes have been dispatched to the region to defend Israel and deter a potential Iranian attack. Iran had vowed to retaliate after it blamed Israel for a blast that killed a top Hamas figure in the Iranian capital. 3 senior Iranian officials have said that only a ceasefire deal in Gaza would hold Iran back from direct retaliation against Israel.
China's economic recovery has lost momentum according to official data. Mixed results out Thursday showed the world's second largest economy endured a patchy start to the second half of the year. Factory output slowed for a third straight month in July. Industrial output grew 5.1% from a year earlier, down slightly from June and below analyst forecasts. However, the country's battered consumer sector slightly improved as stimulus targeting households took effect. Retail sales were up 2.7% in July, higher than a 2% rise in June. It follows dismal export prices and bank lending indicators earlier this month. Some analysts argue Thursday's data puts pressure on policymakers to roll out more support measures aimed at consumers instead of pouring funds into infrastructure. Chinese leaders last month signalled they would focus stimulus at consumers rather than infrastructure and manufacturing. The state planner said last month almost $21 billion raised through special debt issuance this year would subsidise a consumer goods trade-in programme. But a major slump in China's property sector has hurt consumer spending over the past 3 years. 70% of Chinese household wealth is held in real estate, so consumers have kept their wallets shut tight. There were few signs of things improving when separate data on Thursday showed China's new home prices fell at the fastest pace in 9 years in July. Calls for more growth-boosting measures have followed officials ever since a widely expected post-pandemic recovery failed to appear 2 years ago. The government is still targeting growth of around 5% this year. But some analysts fear China may have entered a prolonged economic malaise similar to Japan's in the 1990s, and that bolder reforms may be needed to revive growth.
Peace talks aimed at ending Sudan's shattering civil war continued in Switzerland on Thursday. Discussions began a day before. However, the military's absence from negotiations dampened hopes for imminent steps to alleviate the country's humanitarian crisis. The paramilitary Rapid Support Forces sent a delegation to the talks. But direct mediation will be impossible without the army present, U.S. Special Envoy Tom Perriello said this week.
We will not be able to do in-person mediated talks with the parties if the parties are not there, even if one party is not there.
Instead, participants including Egypt, the UAE, the United Nations, African Union, East African body IGAD, and experts would consult on roadmaps for a cessation of violence and carrying out humanitarian aid deliveries. The army has said its absence from the talks arises from the failure to implement previous U.S. and Saudi-brokered commitments to pull combatants out of civil areas and facilitate aid deliveries. Mediators say both sides disregarded that accord. The RSF has denied many accounts of fighters attacking civilians and looting. It says it is open to a peace deal if the army engages in talks. In Port Sudan, locals hope an agreement can be reached.
We want peace that satisfies all Sudanese people, without excluding any person. I hope that people go back to their homes, and the rest to support those who have been affected, lost their homes, those whose homes were destroyed. We are supporting anything that would lead to an end of the war, with an agreement of everyone in a way that satisfies all people, all over Sudan.
UN officials have warned that Sudan is at breaking point, and that without a larger global response, there will be tens of thousands of preventable deaths from hunger, disease, floods, and violence in the coming months. The war erupted in April 2023 amid disputes over how to integrate the army and RSF as part of a transition from military rule to free elections. The world's worst humanitarian crisis has ensued, with half the 50 million population lacking food and famine taking hold in part of the North Darfur region.
Thousands of women marched through the night across cities in India. That's as outrage escalated over the brutal rape and murder of a young female doctor inside a medical college in Kolkata. In the early hours of Thursday morning, women demonstrated while holding posters that said "Reclaim the Night," referring to the lack of safety for women in India, especially after dark. This included in the city of Kolkata, where the 31-year-old medic was found dead. Protester Rinki Ghosh.
We have come here to demand justice because I have a daughter. I am scared to send her anywhere. If she is working during the night, I do not know what might happen to her. I am scared to send my daughter to study. I want her to sit at home. She should not go anywhere and should instead stay at home. I'm scared. I'm here today because something about this incident must be done. This injustice must stop.
The victim's colleagues said she had gone to sleep on a seminar room floor after a marathon 36-hour shift due to a lack of resting places. She was found dead last Friday. The women's marches follow nationwide protest action taken by doctors, which started last week, demanding justice for the victim and safer working conditions. Many government hospitals in cities across India were forced to suspend all services except emergency departments. Police said last week that a police volunteer has been arrested in connection with the crime. During India's Independence Day ceremony on Thursday, Prime Minister Narendra Modi called for strict punishment for crimes against women. He pledged that the country and government will take this issue seriously.
The deputy leader of South Africa's opposition party, the Economic Freedom Fighters, said that he was resigning to join former President Jacob Zuma's MK party. Here is Floyd Shivambu.
I have decided not to renew the membership of the EFF because I will join and participate in Umkhonto weSizwe party.
The EFF saw its share of the vote fall to below 10% in May's national election, as the newly formed MK party surged ahead to become the third biggest in parliament. EFF's president, Julius Malema.
This is a testing moment. The organization that has lived beyond 10 years has never been through this testing moment. The EFF will have to pass this test or it will have to die.
EFF and MK are both part of a leftist opposition alliance formed after the election to counter coalition government led by the long-ruling African National Congress and the business-friendly Democratic Alliance. Zuma was expelled from the ANC this year after he took the reins of MK, which did better than expected in the election and played a key role in bringing the ANC's share of the vote below 50%.